The criminal indictments against James Comey and Letitia James have both been dismissed. And for those of us that have brains and are capable of reading things such as court filings and Donald Trump's tweets, these were both very obviously political prosecutions, vindictive prosecutions, meritless, baseless. But from what I can tell so far, MAGA doesn't seem to see it that way. Breaking update, a federal judge has dismissed the indictments against both James Comey and Letitia James. Total BS. Luckily, they can both be indicted again because the indictments were dismissed without prejudice. Which is true, they were dismissed without prejudice, but it's tweets like these that prove beyond a reasonable doubt, in fact, that these idiots definitely did not read this ruling at all. Because in the ruling, the judge actually addressed exactly this, the idea of re-indicting both of them on these charges. And when it comes to Letitia James, yeah, she probably is going to be re-indicted. But when it comes to Comey, the judge actually explicitly addressed the argument or the idea of re-indicting him. The government responds that the Attorney General's ratification was proper because she could have personally obtained a new indictment on October 31st, using the grace period set forth in 18 U.S.C. section 3288. That statute provides in part, whenever an indictment or information charging a felony is dismissed for any reason after the period prescribed by the applicable statute of limitations has expired, a new indictment may be returned in the appropriate jurisdiction within 6 calendar months of the date of the dismissal of the indictment or information. What this is saying is that pursuant to 18 U.S.C. section 3288, if a person is indicted before the statute of limitations expires on their charges, like Comey was, and then throughout the course of the proceedings, the statute of limitations on their charges expires, and then the indictment is later dismissed, the government gets a grace period of 6 months to re-indict them to cure the defects in the indictment or cure whatever the problem was that resulted in the dismissal. And then they can bring the charges again, even though the statute of limitations on the original charges has already expired. So you would think that that would apply here. That seems to be what all the MAGA people on Twitter think, but the judge addressed this exact thing. In a footnote, the judge cites a Fourth Circuit case, United States versus Ojedikan. I definitely did not pronounce that right. There's just no way that was correct. But this is a Fourth Circuit case, and Virginia is in the Fourth Circuit, so this precedent is binding on the James and Comey cases because they are happening in Virginia. And this case states that, quote, an invalid indictment, however, cannot serve to block the door of limitations as it swings closed. And just think about what that means for a second. When the government obtains a valid criminal indictment against a person, that basically stops the statute of limitations, or at least provides that grace period that we talked about. If that indictment were to get dismissed down the road, the government can bring charges, they can cure the indictment, and they can run the case back again. But the government cannot get an invalid indictment. They cannot unlawfully obtain an indictment against a person and use that unlawful indictment to stop the statute of limitations from expiring. In other words, because the indictment against James Comey was obtained unlawfully, obtained solely by a prosecutor who was unlawfully appointed, that unlawfully obtained indictment can't be used to stop the statute of limitations, which has expired. So unless the Fourth Circuit were to step in here, or God forbid the Supreme Court were to step in here and pull some wonky shit, James Comey's probably in the clear.